Veronica Escobar didn't expect it to resurface. Not on camera, not from him. But Senator Kennedy had the op-ed in his hands. Highlighted, time-stamped, dated. She tried to clarify it, tried to walk it back. But Kennedy didn't raise his voice. He just read her own words. And when he finished, the silence in that room felt like a verdict. Like and subscribe. And tell us, should public figures be held to everything they've said in print? It started civil, but Kennedy had something in his folder, and Escobar didn't know it was coming. The segment began like most do, clean lighting, polite tones, all smiles. It was a joint interview on federal immigration reform. Senator John Kennedy, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, two lawmakers from very different worlds, seated side by side in a CNN town hall format. The moderator kept it balanced. Questions came from both sides of the aisle. Escobar answered passionately, as always, emphasizing compassion, rehabilitation, root causes. Kennedy mostly listened, barely touched his notes, until the moderator asked a question that seemed routine. Both of you have spoken publicly about border policy and law enforcement. Congresswoman Escobar, you wrote an op-ed last year about systemic reform. Has your thinking evolved since then? She smiled. Absolutely. We all grow. The context was different then, post-crisis, during an emotionally heightened moment. What matters is where we are now and what we're doing today. The moderator nodded, started to pivot, but Kennedy leaned forward. If I may, I have the op-ed right here. Escobar's eyes flickered. Senator, I don't think... Kennedy didn't flinch. Just a short excerpt. I'd like the American people to hear the words as they were published. He unfolded a single sheet of paper. No binder, no gimmicks, just her words. He read them slowly. The criminal justice system is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed, to control, punish, and dehumanize communities of color. The room shifted. Kennedy looked up. Congresswoman, do you stand by that? Escobar sat straighter. That quote was part of a larger context. Kennedy nodded. Of course, here's more context. He continued, it is not enough to reform systems rooted in oppression. We must dismantle and rebuild from the ground up. Gasps from a few in the live audience. The moderator tried to regain control. Senator, perhaps we can let the Congresswoman explain, but Escobar was already speaking. Yes, I wrote those words, but that was about a moment of national grief. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. It was a call for compassion and urgency. Kennedy folded the paper neatly. I understand grief, ma'am, but when you say the system must be dismantled, are you suggesting we throw out due process or just change who gets it? Escobar shook her head. That's not what I meant, and you know it. But Kennedy just looked at her. I only know what you wrote, and the country does too. The moderator took a beat because even they knew this segment had just gone somewhere it wasn't supposed to. And it wasn't Kennedy who made it personal. It was her own words and the decision to walk them back on live TV. She tried to steer it back to policy. He turned the page and the tension tripled. Escobar cleared her throat. She shifted in her seat, changed posture, softened her tone. I think it's important, Senator, that we don't cherry-pick emotional language from moments of national trauma. What I was trying to say, what I still believe, is that systems can evolve. She turned to the moderator, and that's where we should be focusing, on evolution, not condemnation. A few audience members clapped lightly. Kennedy gave a courteous nod. I agree, evolution is good, but I found that when someone says one thing in print and something else on TV, it's not evolution, it's evasion. A hush returned. Escobar narrowed her eyes. Senator, with respect, that's a false equivalence. The op-ed was rhetorical, meant to push for deeper reforms. It was not a legislative proposal. Kennedy lifted his folder again. Then let's look at your legislative proposals. He flipped it to the second page. It was marked with a single yellow tab. The moderator blinked. He hadn't seen that coming. Kennedy read again. ICE is a tool of institutional cruelty. He glanced up. That wasn't from 20. That's from your remarks in 23. That was at a rally, on camera. Escobar took a breathing. I was referring to specific abuses. not the agency itself. But that's not what you said, Kennedy replied. Senator, are you here to solve a problem or to drag people for having complex views? Kennedy looked at her squarely. Ma'am, I'm here because words mean something. And when those words affect policy, affect officers, affect border communities, then clarity matters. The moderator interjected, let's stay on solutions. Congresswoman, how would you redesign ACE if given the chance? Escobar answered immediately, like she had been waiting for this pivot. By demilitarizing it, by restoring humanity to enforcement, by ending blanket raids and focusing on violent threats, not families. A smattering of applause. She took the moment to reset the tone. Polished, poised. But Kennedy didn't move. He tapped the folder again. I've spent time with families too. The ones who lost daughters to fentanyl trafficked across that same border. The ones who didn't get press releases. Just funerals. Silence returned. So when I hear phrases like institutional cruelty, I wonder if you have ever visited the towns where federal withdrawal became cruelty. The room stilled. Escobar didn't respond right away because Kennedy had pivoted it back, not to ICE, not to policy, to the people who weren't in the studio, the ones who felt the outcome but never wrote the op-ed. And that's when the audience stopped clapping. Because this wasn't a debate anymore. It was a mirror. And Escobar's reflection was now public record. The moderator had follow-ups ready, but after that exchange, even he backed off. The audience already had their verdict. The moderator looked down at his cards, then glanced back at Kennedy, then at Escobar. And for the first time all night, he didn't know where to go. There were 3 questions on his card. He skipped them all. Instead, Congresswoman, do you think the language in that op-ed, phrases like dismantle the system, help the current debate, or do they polarize it further? Escobar took a longer pause this time. The kind of pause that isn't for breath, it's for calculation. I think urgency always risks discomfort. But when Black and brown communities say the system doesn't protect them, we should listen. That article was meant to amplify those voices, not erase others. Kennedy didn't react. He just let the sentence sit. Then came the pivot, Escobar's attempt to reclaim ground. Senator, you speak about consequences, but what about the consequences of broken systems that punish poverty, punish migration, punish trauma? Kennedy tilted his head slightly. We should fix what's broken, ma'am, but I don't believe the answer is to pretend the systems never worked at all. Escobar pushed again. And I don't believe the answer is to read one quote out of context and turn it into a weapon. That's when Kennedy spoke, not loudly, just with weight. It wasn't one quote, it was an op-ed, published under your name. And when you published it, you were not a private citizen. You were an elected official, speaking not just for yourself, but for policy. The audience shifted. The applause from earlier? Gone. Even Escobar's supporters looked less certain now because this wasn't a soundbite. It was a receipt, and receipts aren't partisan. The moderator looked at the clock, but Kennedy went one level deeper. You said the system is doing exactly what it was built to do, control and dehumanize. If that's true, then everyone working in it is complicit. He paused. Do you believe that, Congresswoman? That ICE agents, local police, prosecutors, people who follow the law are agents of cruelty by default? Escobar blinked. No, of course not. That was never the intent. But it was the statement, Kennedy said, and that difference between intent and outcome was now center stage. The audience was no longer applauding. They were leaning in. A few heads nodded, others exchanged glances. Escobar saw it too. For the first time, she looked slightly cornered, not by rage, not by aggression, but by her own phrasing, because the more she explained, the more the room remembered. She had written it. Kennedy had just read it out loud, and the crowd had made up its mind. One sentence, one breath too long. And just like that, the walk back collapsed. Veronica Escobar had done well, up to a point. She'd deflected, reframed, pivoted. But pressure compounds, especially when it isn't loud. And Kennedy wasn't loud. He was precise. She tried again to steer the segment back. I think what matters now is where we go from here. Not just reliving old language, but building policy that reflects compassion and security. The moderator nodded, relieved for a soft landing, but Kennedy wasn't finished. Compassion and security sound nice, but let's be honest, your op-ed didn't mention security once. Escobar tried to respond. Because it wasn't about border walls or surveillance, it was about justice. Kennedy cut in, calm as ever. Then why use the phrase dismantle and rebuild from the ground up? What exactly were you proposing to replace? Escobar opened her mouth, stopped. That one pause, barely 2 seconds, was everything. Because everyone watching knew she didn't have an answer. I meant philosophically, she said. Kennedy raised an eyebrow. The federal budget isn't philosophical, ma'am. It's line items and signatures. If you want to burn down the house, you better know what you're building next. The moderator tried to interrupt. Let's get back to bipartisan solutions. But Tulsi Gabbard, watching from the wings, was already shaking her head. Off camera, off mic, but caught by audience smartphones, she muttered. She didn't think anyone would actually read it back to her. By now, clips were trending. One TikTok looped Escobar's pause, layered over a caption that read, "When your past self exposes your present self." Another stitched Kennedy's final line with the headline, "The budget isn't philosophical. It's paper and power." Even CNN's chyron had shifted. Escobar defends op-ed after Kennedy reads it line by line. Back on stage, Escobar tried to recover. Senator Kennedy, I'd invite you to look at my full voting record, my work in committee, my statements on modernizing enforcement. Kennedy smiled politely. I've seen your votes. I just hadn't seen your words laid out quite so clearly. And with that, he folded the op-ed once, tucked it into his folder, and leaned back. He didn't gloat. He didn't add anything. Because the line had already landed, and the pause she gave, that was the silence the audience would remember longer than anything she said. You know it's bad when the staff stops moving, and when the clip needs no narration. You know it landed. The energy backstage shifted first. Escobar's comms director, standing just off camera, stopped scrolling and just stared. Mouth slightly open, no instructions, no hand signals, just frozen. Because she saw what everyone saw. Escobar had been outmaneuvered, not yelled over, not insulted, outquoted. And the clip? It was already out there. Someone in the second row had filmed the entire exchange on a personal phone, from Kennedy's first quote to Escobar's 2-second pause. No zooms, no graphics, no commentary, just a raw 36-second video with the caption, "He read her own op-ed. She tried to pivot, then paused." That was the moment. Within 10 minutes, it had 80K views. No hashtags, no SEO, just momentum. Because the public didn't need an explanation. They felt it. In the clip, Escobar's tone went from assertive, defensive, technical, and Kennedy never flinched. That contrast? It was cinematic. Someone added dramatic music. Another stitched it with a reaction from a criminal justice reformer saying, "This is why your words matter, especially when you don't think they'll ever be read back to you." Cable networks picked it up next. One panel ran a segment titled Op-Ed Echo Chamber, When the Past Won't Stay Quiet. Another framed it more bluntly. Kennedy silently shreds Escobar's talking points with her own words. Back in the studio, Escobar tried to rebound. She returned to talking points. Our immigration policy must reflect who we are as a country of values, a country of empathy. Kennedy didn't even respond. That was the power move, because he knew she wasn't talking to him anymore. She was talking to damage control, to headlines, to Twitter. And that's what the crowd noticed most. That shift from authenticity to PR. A young man in the audience whispered to his friend, "She lost the room." He never even raised his voice. His friend replied, "He didn't need to. He had the receipts." By the time they hit commercial break, everyone knew. This wasn't about immigration anymore. It wasn't even about policy. It was about credibility. And Escobar didn't lose it because of a scandal. She lost it because of a sentence. By the time her office crafted a statement, the internet had already written the ending. Backstage, Escobar's team went into motion. Laptops opened, phones buzzed, tabs refreshed every 30 seconds. Someone typed up a statement labeled, "Clarification of op-ed intent in legislative focus." But it was too late, because the story wasn't in the clarification. It was in the pause. In the line Kennedy read. In the look Escobar gave when she realized it couldn't be walked back. News alerts buzzed faster than her office could respond. Kennedy reads Escobar's op-ed back to her on live TV. Quote versus clarification. Who really owned the moment? Op-ed or op-mess? One major outlet ran a poll. Who came across more credible in tonight's exchange? Kennedy, 71% Escobar, 19%. Undecided, 10%. Her digital team flagged it immediately, tried to drown it in follow-up tweets. Let's remember, Congresswoman Escobar has dedicated her life to justice, equity, and humane reform. Tonight's town hall was a platform for compassion and courage. But none of those tweets went viral. The ones that did, a Kennedy supporter quote tweeting the original op-ed with, "Y'all tried to delete this." He laminated it. A clip of Escobar's pause with overlaid text. "You ever write something so spicy you forget you wrote it?" And the killer, a simple screenshot of Kennedy holding the page with the caption, "No rebuttal necessary." Meanwhile, Kennedy remained silent. No tweets, no threads, no post-game spin, because he didn't need to. He had asked one question, read one quote, let her fill the rest of the airtime. Tulsi Gabbard, now watching from a green room, texted a colleague, "This is exactly why I never publish anything I wouldn't defend in court." When the moderator returned for closing thoughts, the tone had changed. Thank you both for a spirited discussion. Final reflections before we wrap? Escobar smiled tightly. "I'm proud of my work, proud of my words. Yes, all of them. And I believe the American people want leaders who speak from the heart, even when it's messy." Kennedy gave a light nod, said nothing, because when you already own the moment, you don't need a closing line. The audience clapped, polite, controlled, but it was no longer applause. It was closure. And in homes across the country, voters weren't just replaying the debate. They were rereading her words. Cameras cut. Audience filed out. But one sentence stayed behind, and she knows it'll follow her. When the lights dimmed, Escobar's face changed. That public poise faded. The tight smile became a clenched jaw. Not out of anger, out of recognition. Because she knew. This wasn't about a debate anymore. It wasn't about ICE or border policy or language in a vacuum. It was about credibility, and the moment that exposed the distance between what you write and what you're willing to read aloud again. As she walked down the hallway toward her car, a staffer whispered, "It's already in the headlines, all of it." She nodded, didn't answer, didn't need to, because what echoed in her mind wasn't the headlines. It was Kennedy's line, delivered without heat, without malice. "If you want to burn down the house, you better know what you're building next." That quote was already printed on posters, captioned in videos, screenshotted under reaction tweets. In the following days, Escobar's office released follow-ups, podcast appearances, clarifying interviews. Didn't matter. Every time she tried to restate the op-ed's intent, someone played the clip. Every new explanation was met with the same reminder. "You said what you said." At a town hall in her district, someone asked her point blank, "Do you still believe the system must be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up?" She paused again. Not as long, but still, a pause. And in that silence, the crowd didn't wait. They remembered, because some moments don't expire. They echo. And in that echo is a warning, not just for Escobar, but for every elected official who assumes no one's keeping receipts. Because someone is, and sometimes he brings them to the table, reads them out loud, and leaves you with nothing but your own signature. Like and subscribe if you believe public words should be owned publicly. And tell us in the comments, which moment stuck with you most, and would you have walked it back or stood by it?